I worked there early voting.
So.
We got 200 and something for early voting. But then on election day, we only got,
Yeah.
they went to save Sam Labor, we only got like 36 voters. So
Then
that's-
what, it should be, it's just.
All that.
It's in the agenda.
In the, yeah, in the agenda.
she's so
There.
cool. That's where she met you.
Oh,
there we go.
She's
Yeah, I
one
can-
for there too, because her normal person is not me. It's Pam McKinney. That's her normal
I
job.
have a gavel, but. Yeah. Well, we'll go ahead and call the meeting, to order. So the first thing we will do is take attendance. I'm sure we have quorum, and Noah has graciously volunteered to do that.
Hannah Kessler. Elaine Campbell.
Here.
Rose here. Gracie.
Here?
Wenda.
I'm here.
Tracy. Not here. William. Not here. Dr. Levels.
Yes.
Bridget. Not here. And Renato. So not here. And Anna. Here.
Yeah. Do we have quorum?
I believe we do. Yeah.
Awesome, so let the record reflect that we do have quorum, and we will be starting at 6:04 PM. So do I need a motion to open the meeting?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. I think the ayes have it. So the first thing we do have on the agenda. Oh, I do want to declare that a legal notice was posted in time for the meeting as well. I do want to also make sure the record reflects that we did have a legal notice meeting, notice for the meeting was filed on June 5th at 2:26 PM. So just want to make sure that that's noted as well. So first we, as per the agenda, we're going to open the meeting for any public comments on topics for discussion. So we're going to now move to public comments. If there are anyone online,
No, no one online.
I guess we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the discussion and vote on a secretary. So we do not currently have a secretary. Camilla, who was our secretary, is now our vice chair. So should make sure I actually took notes because I wanted to make sure I did this correctly since it's my first time running this. So are there any open nominations for the position of CEAC secretary?
I would be happy to nominate myself for secretary.
Okay.
I second that.
Oh. Are there any other nominations for CEAC secretary? Okay, upon hearing no further nominations, we will close the nominations for CEAC secretary. And we can just take a vote by general consent, and since we only have one person, and we will appoint Anna. What's your last name, Anna?
Coca, COCA.
Okay, so will you be able to take notes during this meeting?
Yes.
Thank you so much. So, okay, so now for our next point on the meeting, we're going to review and discuss the 2026 primary runoff election. That's going to be presented by our elections department.
Thank you. I guess I would like to introduce the individuals from the elections department here. So I'm the elections administrator, Paul Adams. We have our deputy elections administrator.
Let me go back. Hi, everybody.
And we'll have a whole team of people over here, so I'm gonna let them introduce themselves and go around. So we'll start with Daniel.
Hi, everyone, my name is Daniel Rivera. I'm a program coordinator.
I am Antonisha Hunter. I am also a program coordinator.
I am Deidre Kirk. I'm the administration manager or financial. Hi, everyone. I'm Jayla Dade, and I'm here on contract temporarily.
I'm Carla Martinez. I'm the bilingual program.
Hello, I'm Tatoma Phillips and I am voting sites supervisor.
Hey, everybody, I think y'all know me. I'm Nick Solorzano. I'm the communications manager.
And I'm gonna let Nick and his team have put together a presentation for us. I'm gonna let him go through most of that and then chime in at certain points.
Hey, y'all. So we're gonna start with the March 3rd primary, 2026. And you can see on your screen, sorry, this laptop is out of click. Judges, 670 judges, early voting 148. Our election day was 522. We hired, onboarded, trained 3,581 clerks. We actually trained more than that. That's how many we had that actually served in this election. Student clerks, this is our favorite program. The communications team, the Dallas County Elections is incredibly proud of this. These kids get paid $18.24 an hour. They put in a 16-hour day. They put in a full day of work. They get there when the judges get there. They're incredibly helpful. If you, many of you do serve as election judges, then you know that these kids can be incredibly helpful throughout the day. Hey. And so we are so proud of that number, and we look forward to getting that number closer to 400 and 500 when we get to November. So we have a page on our website, thanks Jayla, that you can go in there and do the application, and Carla. So if you have any high school kids, send them to our website. It's under election workers, become high school poll worker, and they can start filling it out as soon as they want. But yeah, we're gonna try to go to 400 to 500 for November. Regional site workers, 92, inspectors and technicians, 105, phone bank operators, that's in the room right over here next, or a couple rooms over. We have 35, and those are people who can call in if a judge or a clerk has an issue. As you can see, we had 4,365 workers. Those are people trained for this primary. It was quite a lot of work placed, called and placed by Tacoma Phillips, our voting sites manager. She and her team call all of those people. They get them into training. After they go into training, they place them. And those are all just done by her and her team. They work weekends, nights, holidays, everything. She's still here tonight. So this is our turnout. We had, y'all saw this March primary. It was really good turnout for a primary. You could see as compared to other elections, we had 2026, we had 252,336. That is double 2022. That is double 2024, and that is, double 2020. It was a really high turnout. We saw bend towards early voting, which we love. We would rather have you vote early, because if you try to wait till election day, something could happen. If you vote early and something happens, we can work it out and you still have time. But let me admit.
All right, that was me.
No. And so you can see all the numbers here for yourself. If you have any questions, let me know. But early voting was really, really popular this go around. I think we knew that driving that was if you waited till election day, you had to vote in your precinct. So we had, and we'll talk more about the push for communications, but we think a lot of people were made aware and trying to sidestep that so they wouldn't vote early. That's why we saw such a high increase in turnout, early voting. There's a bigger look at the comparisons right there. Yeah, 26.24% voted in a primary election, and that is huge for us. Really excited about that number. We hope it keeps going. So a review of the communication. So this is our little vote figure guy here. And we work with Alpha Business. Well, I'll start first. The Commissioners Court gave us a little, just over about $1 million to work with ABI. ABI is our vendor for Dallas County elections. They do the HHS stuff, do election stuff for us. And so just to kind of review the numbers from that, we'll go to this campaign report now. But yeah, so traditional media, this ran from February 9th to election day and it ran out through election day. But what we have here is direct mail. We sent a mailer that said, please go vote early. Election day, you're going to have to vote at your specific precinct. Here's a QR code that links to a tool that we build in-house that lets you find your election day. It gave you early voting or election day. And so we mailed that. I know we have 1.45 million registered voters, and you can see there it says 763,000 people. That's how many households. So multiple people per household. We sent an individual mailer to over 763,000 households in this election, right at the beginning of early voting. And we see that at least 22,091 people scanned the QR code, and we can track that. A lot of people took that information, and obviously we'll just go to dallascounty.votes.org. But the people that actually used the QR code was 22,000 people, votes 3%, which is actually pretty good for a mailer. Broadcast TV, we had 112 commercials ran. That's an individual count, right? So whether you see it once or twice, 3 times a night, we ran 112 commercials. On broadcast television and on radio, 263 commercials. And you can see impressions and reach. I won't read every number, but we reached in the millions. And we're pretty proud of that. We're really thankful to the Commissioner's Court for giving us the funds to do it. Display ads. This is more and more important, right? We can draw a geofence around Dallas County and make sure only people from Dallas County get these ads. So display ads are what you would see if you're on a website and you see something on the right, left, on top of your screen, somewhere in there. We did Facebook ads, CTV, Amazon streaming, Hulu, YouTube, those commercials that you get in between your TV breaks. You can see we reached quite a few there. And again, that's all committed to Dallas County. Those digital ads allow us to be very exact. If you take an ad out on traditional TV, traditional radio, it goes to our market, which could go into Tarrant County, can go into Collin and Denton. These digital ads are strictly geofenced to Dallas County elections. So you shouldn't have seen it outside of that. Unless we knew you were a voter for Dallas County and you're a registered voter for Dallas County and you were traveling, that's the only time you should be able to see the ad. It would have gone to your phone or something else because we know where you live, where you're registered. So we think it was a really successful campaign. We did text. So we did 2 rounds of text. It reached about 879,000 people. Clicks and scans. We actually saw a lot of that. We knew the day we sent the text. And then we saw a lot of people drop into the Find Your Vote Load Center tool. So we kind of tracked that. That actually went really, really well. This, of course, we have 3 languages in Dallas County, Vietnamese and Spanish, as well as English. And this, we did Vietnamese radio. There's a Vietnamese cable television that runs here in Dallas and runs in Houston. We did Vietnamese ads in their biggest magazine. Same thing for, we did ads in Spanish magazines, and Univision, I believe, is the one we focus on when it comes to television. So the next part is the media relations. This is when we did, we sent out a press release that says Paul Adams is available to talk to you about elections March 3rd. And so Paul was going to quite a few interviews with our English language television. We sent Ryan, our alt language Vietnamese speaker translator, into the Vietnamese television. He did a lot of radio interviews. These are the free ones where they invite us on just to talk to their audience to help them with the election. We did quite a few of that as well. Yeah, so ABI believes we reached about over 7 million. We made over 7 million impressions, whether you saw us on TV, whether it was a digital ad, whether it was a radio ad, whether it was streaming on your Hulu. That is a huge number for us. I know we did see some confusion still on election day in the precincts, but we covered every square inch of Dallas County as much as we can reach. And we have a lot of amazing partners that are also getting the word out about this. Yes, ma'am.
What was the total cost for this year's communication package?
So the total cost was started off at about 500,000 for TV, digital, radios. Commissioners felt that we need to send an old-fashioned, I say old-fashioned, but a traditional mailer to every single household. That mailer obviously comes with I forget that stamp is 39 cents, something around that. That was the big cost. So we sent 739,000 mailers, paid for a stamp for each one of those and sent those out. So 500,000 was the digital, TV, radio, magazines. And then another 500,000 was the individual mailer.
So, 1 million.
1 million.
focus of the entire, like all these touch points about early voting?
Yeah.
Okay, and
So the-
would you say that y'all
No, it wasn't just early, it was for.
also like general,
Correct.
there's an
It
election
would give you
happening?
information on early vote and election, either one, whichever one you wanted. It was both. It was
Yeah,
included.
it ran both, and it would switch. So we start off, please vote early, because election day is gonna be
Yeah.
different. So we start off with a very early voting push. Once early voting ends, then we start off at the last. We have 4 days to blast. You're gonna have to go to your precinct.
Would you say that you felt like it wasn't a huge issue the day of election day? Because you said, I think you mentioned that, like, did it feel like a big problem on election day that there were a
So
lot
we're
of?
gonna talk about the navigators and all that stuff.
Okay,
Yeah,
But
the challenges. slide.
Okay.
It's there.
yeah, but I'm not sure what more we could do besides text every cell phone number we had twice and then send the mailer. So I guess what I was trying to say is we covered very well everything that we could cover, besides going and knocking on everyone's door and taking them to the polls. Right, but
And Nick, if I could, Dee Dee, you had the exact amount, right, that we paid?
We paid, ABI $889,613. So we end up, we got some cost savings on the postage because we used bulk. So what we used, is they allowed us to, save a little money on the postage. But yes, we did. I just.
Can you say the numbers again, please?
$889,613.
the largest single expense was postage. Digital's affordable, radio's better, I'm not better, a little bit more expensive, TV's the most expensive, but that mailer was, that was the largest.
Is this does the 889 include the 500,000 you just referred
Yes.
to?
Yes, it does. It includes
Total.
the 500,000. Then there was a small charge for like professional services, where it's like 52,000. But the bulk of the money went to the advertising, the commercials that the little vote guy they created, that kind of stuff like that. But it was all based for the voters. It wasn't for them, for their professional services. It was a small amount of professional services. Majority of it went just for the promotion. Nick did an outstanding job of making sure that that money was spent directly for the cost of promoting the election.
And me and Paul went over all the materials. They would send us a draft. We'd make some changes, edit some stuff. We send it to the commissioners for their approval. They approve it, and then we send it back to them, and they send it out however way, whether it's Hulu or TV or radio. But yeah, so the big points there are, it was in all 3 languages. We got really good coverage. We think we made a pretty big dent in that. And yeah, thanks to the commissioners. It could have been completely different. I think we set aside 250,000. 300,000, yeah, and then thankfully, the Commissioners Court helped and we bolstered that up. But any other questions for the communications piece?
Are we gonna go through the exact communication?
I actually have a folder with every piece that I can send y'all.
That would be great.
Cool, yeah, I can send that to everybody. They send us kind of a final folder, all the stuff we send with the ads and with everything. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like a zip folder and it has pretty much everything.
That'd be great.
Yeah, perfect.
I have one question, Nick.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that might be a question for someone on the staff, but considering the fact that the reason that had to be done was because of a vote made by the Republican Party, were they able to be billed at all for any of that or no?
The Commissioners Court are the ones who passed it to us, so that
Okay.
they found that money somewhere, somewhere else in the county.
If they wouldn't have had it, what you would have just used what you had.
We probably was stuck with very digital.
So what you're saying is that the Commissioners Court is not holding the Republicans responsible for this situation.
I can't answer that one.
We'd have to
I can
probably
just say
ask them.
that.
But maybe we can though.
What was the question?
Well, I mean, if it costs us nearly $1 million to try to rectify this, and it was obviously called by one decision by certain people, I mean, has there been any kind of effort to try to get them to be somewhat responsible for what they chose to do? Apparently not, if they found it elsewhere. So just wonder.
If I may speak about how that works, primary election law is totally different from any other election that we ever have.
Right.
So primary law only allows us to charge the entities for election day only. So that that promotion was for both voting election day. So the courts decided, Commissioner's Court decided to try to get ahead of it, and that was their purpose of paying for that upfront. Normally, if we do anything for a contracted election, if it's requested by the entities, yes, they absorb that cost. However, because of what happened and it happened at a late date, commissioners decided, let's get in front of it and try to educate the public so that they realize this is what's going on. And just kind of just like the way League of Women Voters would do, this is the information. We want to get it out to you. We want to encourage you to go and vote. This is the issue. They didn't really throw blame. It was just, to keep face and make sure that we took the point of making sure we educated our voters and let them know these locations, this is the situation, these are the locations, this is what's going on. So that was the whole point, was just to kind of get in front of the drama of what happened, and just so the county was making sure that they did their part to make sure everybody was aware.
Thank you. I have one more. Does that mean that typically the budget for communications is around 300? Or like, is that a consistent investment?
We've done that so I've been here for about 4.5 years. We have done that outreach portion, yes. And that started with SB1. When SB1 happened several years ago, we now work when our budgeting season comes around to put in at least that much, because that was a huge issue. And then we thought, well, maybe something will happen next year. Let's put that much back in for next year. And something's happened every year, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it's something we do put in the budget now, starting with SB1, whenever that.
But because of midterms and gubernatorial coming up, we beefed up that budget so that we will absorb that cost. That will be a part of our November cost.
Any other questions about the communications? And I'll make sure after this meeting, I'll send y'all can see the videos and all the languages and the mailer and all that.
So at some point, do people go back through that, or are we gonna go back through that? I know you said you would send it to us. I know on my end with the work that I do, a lot of times people don't know what a precinct is.
Yeah.
They want to vote, but they have no idea what a precinct is. And so from the communications I saw, even I was a little confused. So I could see how that could happen for someone who's not doing this work all of the time.
Yeah, our language.
My sister, she lives in Seattle. When I was trying to explain the precinct situation, she was very confused. She's college educated. So it's like, I do think there's work to be done, like on our ends for those of us who do other work with our organizations. I do feel we could have helped even just a little bit to get the word out in an organized way. I think there's still room for that.
Yeah, so a lot of our push originally was just go vote early. Like there's a lot to explain here. Just please go vote early. And you're right, when we start talking about precincts and other election words, it gets a little, yeah. And then you get used to it, right? I don't need to pay. Part of this is I got a mailer, because we talked to a few people. They're like, I got a mailer. It said that I have to find where I vote on election day if I don't vote early. And then we talked to at least 2 or 3 people that said, I didn't look at it because I know where I vote. I always go vote over there. So why would I look at this thing? Because I go vote. And so there was just this interesting, like, you got the mailer. You just didn't follow the link because you know where to vote, because we've been doing this since 2019.
And I will add, I think it's very important for all of us to make sure that we're not talking to people about the November election and talk about precincts.
Right.
Because if we bring that up, I certainly don't want people to think, oh, I heard that we did, so we got to go back. No. Don't. So as much as I think is absolutely important for us to do as much research on what happened in the primary back in March, and certainly, looking over any data that Nick is able to send out to everybody, I certainly don't want word to get out to hear people say, oh, but we're going to have precinct-based voting in some members, so you need to we want to stay away from that, at least publicly, because we want to continue down the path of we're back to vote centers. That's where we are now. But certainly in the future, in case something happens in the primary in a couple of years, we could be ready for that.
And that's part of education, is for
Absolutely.
our community to understand that the parties control the primary elections and the voting sites. They had that authority to make those decisions, and everything else. The other elections are governed by the county and the commissioners. And so I think people understand we got a couple more years before we come back to that catastrophe, but yeah, just understand we don't have to deal with it currently.
I may add as well, I work a lot with high school, with our new 18-year-olds that we're registering to vote.
Yep.
Terminology is important. So if you just say, your polling site is whatever, they don't know what polling means. If it's the first time they're
Exactly.
voting, it'll be very, explain that.
Yep.
Yeah.
First time voters.
I agree. So our next topic, there's no more questions. March 3rd, 2026 primary elections. So these are challenges, lessons learned, redistricting. So that was such a huge topic. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, by the way, you also have to, on election day, you have to find your precinct. But their districting was, I don't know if you want to talk about redistricting, Paul, and the big lift. That
Yeah,
was.
I mean, I think it's, as we look at how things led up into the primary election, I think it's good to get a perspective of all the things that kind of compounded in creating what it was that happened. I would initially start with some of the numbers that Nick showed earlier of the massive numbers of people that showed up early to vote. And even those individuals who did show up on election day and did know where to go to. I mean, we were in record-breaking territory with all of those issues. We were in record-breaking territory of the number of people who did go out and vote. With that said, that's not an excuse. With that said, there's a lot of serious problems that happen. And I think it really began with that redistricting piece, which was now we're in a situation where we had a November election last year, so we can't make changes during the election to precinct boundaries. We get this information from the state. Now we have to move through relatively quickly to make precinct boundary changes, get that approved by Commissioner's Court. At the same time, we are negotiating contracts with both political parties for the primary election that's coming up in March. So those things are happening simultaneously. That was the situation to where the Republican Party had chose that they wanted initially to do a hand count and to do a separate non-joint primary. The Democratic Party had told me that they were interested in doing a joint if the other party was willing to do that. The Republican Party did not want to do that. We continued to negotiate with them. Melissa and I were on calls through Christmas. I think Christmas Eve, we were on a call. Through New Year's Eve. I mean, we were handling a lot of this. We were trying to make as much time as we could available for the process of negotiation, even though it was right through the holidays. And then as many of you know, then at the last second, the Republicans decided to still do separate, but not do the hand count and move forward with just completely separate primaries, the way that they had initially wanted, just with our equipment. The other part of that came into creating even more challenges that continue to compound. As Dee Dee's already mentioned, the law for primaries is that the political parties, when it's a non-joint, the political parties make this election. So as an example, for November, the Commissioner's Court will determine where the early voting locations are and the vote centers for election day. That will go before Commissioner's Court. They will make the final determination of what that is. In a non-joint primary, the way the law is written, the political parties have the authority to make those selections. So when I would hear people talk about, well, there's a lot of states and jurisdictions, even counties here in Texas, that have precinct-based voting. So what's the big deal? How can you not figure out precinct-based voting? There's a whole bunch of the country that is precinct-based voting. The difference here is the fact, number one, there's no institutional knowledge because people have not had precinct-based voting for a number of years. As Nick just mentioned, you have a large number of people. They just remember, I go to the school down the street. I know, Mary Louise has been a poll worker there forever. My mom knew her. I go see her every time. That is the institutional knowledge that is created in elections in places that have precinct-based voting. When we move to a situation that's completely different, and people lose that, going back to it, it's not impossible, but it is difficult. And then you add on top of that the fact that the political parties, they got to choose where their voting locations were. So that meant there were 4 different types of polling places. There were some polling locations that were just Democrat locations. Only Democrats went to that place. Other ones were just Republican. Only Republicans went to that location. Then you had places where Democrats and Republicans went. But some of those were places where the same precincts went there. So maybe there were 3 precincts that were the Democrats sent there, and there were the same 3 precincts Republicans sent there. So everybody lives in those precincts would go to the same place. But then you had a 4th category where maybe at that particular location, the Democrats decided there's going to be 3 precincts here. And maybe the Republicans had decided, well, there's going to be 3 precincts there, but they're going to be different precincts. Or there's only going to be 2 precincts that are there, not all 3. So you could actually have a case where a husband and a wife could walk into a polling location and want to vote different parties, and it could be that one voted there and then the other one didn't vote there. So that just added to the level of complexity of the election, and I think added a lot of the confusion, where if, you were talking with your neighbor, maybe, your neighbor had voted earlier, came home from work, was talking with your, oh yeah, we vote right down here, and you walked in, maybe you were a different party, you didn't think to ask your neighbor that, and now all of us, no, you don't vote here. Well, wait a second, somebody just told me that they voted here and everything was fine. And then it added another level of confusion to the situation.
Just to contextualize that with numbers, we did look at that. Of the 791 precincts that we have, 507 had different polling places by the party. So only 284 precincts, if you were either party living in that precinct and you walked into the same location, you could vote. All the 507 other precincts, the parties had different locations for them. And some of that may have been single locations, or it may have just been a different location where other, both parties still were. In most precincts, the parties actually were not at the same location.
So a lot of level of complexity that we saw with the, yeah.
And I have a unique situation in Grand Prairie. Grand Prairie has 3 different counties they're operating in. And so when you have a voter that walk in, the neighbor on the same street, one side of the street is Tarrant, the other side is Dallas. And how do we educate the community to that end? We need to do something better so that when October hits for early voting, they will be aware that the lines have been drawn and you may be in a different county. You may not be in Dallas County. And the ads they hear, because they hear what they want to hear sometimes, right? Our community does. They said I could vote anywhere in your county.
Right.
We have to keep saying that when we're sitting in the voting centers.
Yeah.
In your county.
Yeah.
And it doesn't say it says it on the ads, but they don't hear it now.
Right.
They just say, they said I can vote anywhere, so why are you not allowing me to vote at this vote center?
Mhm.
And I give them, our team says the closest location for Tarrant County. I don't say this is the only place.
Right.
The closest place to this vote center is this. They still don't hear that. How can we address that? Because Anna will tell you, she lives in Grand Prairie. She knows the confusion that's going on over there. How do we make a better case for more advertising so the people like the Grand Prairies in Dallas County would know? We've got to tell them the lines have been drawn now that you're not at that same precinct where you used to vote, where your grandparents voted. It's a change now.
I have one idea, but I don't know if it gets at that specific issue, but in November, we'll have a larger group of voters, right? And it'll be easier in November because you have voted any location in your county. And I'm wondering if there's messaging that goes out when you have a captive audience. And now I'm looking at you, Nick, like they're there. So before they leave or as they're leaving, the last thing they hear is like, remember, the next election may not be your voting location, or some message that reinforces the fact that voting changes nearly for every election because of laws or because of the type of election that it is. And like, do not count on this being your same location and the next election is, you know, March or whenever the next election is. I'm just wondering if you have a captive audience, there's something we can do that doesn't cost thousands of dollars in printing. It can be shared like at that time, you know,
That would be
just the next election is, sorry.
right. I think we can probably communicate those things that we know. Sometimes after some most recent elections, we had no idea that we were going to be redistricting. So some of that messaging was not possible to even share in that last election
Yeah.
that we had. No one knew this was going to happen. And so sharing information that you know is probably the date.
Or just like
I mean, it's
that,
difficult to predict.
we
what's gonna
don't
happen.
know,
I mean,
right?
We just don't know.
It might change.
Right.
Look it up before, you know, to
Yeah,
communicate that
sure.
it might change.
Yeah, no one could have predicted that.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of talk about it. There was a lot of rumors, but nothing substantial.
And there's no judgment.
That, yeah,
It's just like, can we,
yeah.
is that a way?
And
to-
if I could, we do have the information sheet on the elections.
Yeah.
Right, maybe when we send out information, everybody on the committee about the ad campaign, maybe send that page. Because that gives at least all the statutory information we know about a particular election that maybe you could use to distribute in the community. That I think might
That'd
be
be
helpful.
To like add an exclamation point, like, it's not, these are the locations, here's the list, or like, even here's the date for the next one. It's just the simple message that like things might change for the next one. And so read or like, you know, or look it up before you leave, something, you know what I mean? Like zooming way out from here's what to expect. It's like, know that things might change
But we will communicate.
and read on the website. Yeah, or wherever we'll communicate.
I have one question about something you said, Paul, about the fact that on primary, I'm not talking about November, on the primary election day, that is the decision of the parties, even vote centers. I know that when we, for example, for November, you said a list of vote centers that the commissioners have to approve, and we have that list. I don't know, like a certain number of days before the election, so that we start advertising it. Is there a date where they cannot change it, even if it's primary? Because I was told by some election judges that they found out like a couple of days before they were supposed to go to their vote center that it changed.
Yep, you got it right. There is no deadline. You know,
Okay.
of all the people in this room that feel that pain, it's Tacoma right there. Her department was handling all of those last minute changes. So one of the things that I wanted to mention goes along exactly to that point is, you know, I think to the benefit of the voters in the county, the commissioners move forward with that ad campaign that had more money for a direct mail piece. I love digital ads. I think they're great, but the direct mail piece I think was important. But realistically, what should have happened with that direct mail piece is we should have been able to put on the direct mail piece your location. And then now, you know, and like we already said, it could be different. It was Democrat, Republican. So that way you would have that postcard. That postcard would have said, all right, if you're a Democrat, this is where you go. If you're a Republican, this is where you go. And you would have that physical piece of paper that you would have been able to keep with you. And then you would say, oh no, I know I'm going to the right place because I have it on a piece of paper. That was not possible. And Nick will tell you, because I even had him call them to see, okay, can you guys stop the presses and hold up the printing of these cards? Because was there a way we could get all of those polling places on every one of those cards? But the problem was they were changing all the way, I think, what was it? Like
Maybe even a week before.
Wow.
where they were getting changes to their locations. Because, and a lot of them, I mean, I'm not, there was a deadline. I'm not saying that, you know, those individuals in the political parties that were working on finding locations, you know, I'm not saying that they were not working really, really hard. The problem is that because we were so late in the game, I don't care who you were. When you're calling up places trying to find out, okay, can I get into your church? Okay, I found, here's a community center that happens to be in that precinct. Does this one work? Well, you gotta pick up the phone. You have to call, okay, who's the church secretary? And, you know, it's the church secretary is gonna be on vacation, or well, I gotta talk to the pastor. I'm gonna go to this committee and come back. You think you have that location, then all of a sudden, the last second, somebody calls, no. You know, the committee voted against it. They don't want anything to do with this. So now you gotta go find someplace else. All of those things were happening, and like I said, Tacoma's department was having to handle all that because then contracts had to be written for all of those locations. So it created a problem. I wish that we would have had a deadline by which we could have stepped in and said, look, if you guys don't figure out the locations, then we will if you want to contract with, but that didn't happen. So it was a case to where the law just allows them to select and there's no deadline. And it created a massive issue for us logistically to get everything out to the right locations, because we were at a point where we were already delivering equipment when we're getting changes being made to the locations, which made things even more difficult for us internally. But like I said, for the voters, what made it difficult was the fact that I couldn't put it on the card, which would have helped them.
Can I ask a question, Paul? Obviously, this is just going to require a legislative solution. Are you aware of any efforts that are underway, either by you or others in the county, that are working with legislators to try to address this problem in the next session?
I know that the events of the primary here and in Williamson County are being discussed in the legislature. I do not know of any specific pieces of legislation that have been discussed, but I don't know if Melissa, I know you've been in touch with some people in our association, but I don't know if.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics, but I know that I can say that there was some surprise from the legislature that the county political parties had as much say as they did in terms of how the ownership of how we conduct the elections. And so I know that that was an eye opener, and that there is discussion of introducing some legislation to kind of, you know, make that a little more of an even playing field, but I don't know what it is specifically yet. They're paying attention. They're gonna make an effort. I think it's bipartisan also, by the way.
Yeah. People from both parties were very frustrated. I was an elected judge, and that's definitely it was
And that's
definitely
the
a
question,
bipartisan
yeah.
frustration.
Who all worked the day of election day from the CEAC?
I heard from a lot of
Yeah.
people that worked that day.
So 1, 2, 3, 4 of us, we were out there.
Mhm.
And it was extremely challenging.
Yes.
You know, there were several elections.
My entire group of people who work with me, they say, we're never going to work election.
Right, yeah, I've heard a lot of.
But fortunately, the runoff was not that way, and I was
Right.
able to capture that. But
Right, right.
we're going to lose a lot of workers if you ever have to do that.
Yeah. It was,
Concerning, may I?
Yeah.
What?
If
Oh,
you're the
yes.
chair.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead, Tracy. Yes, it's been a couple of years back that I've tried to get Grand Prairie City Hall to be a voting location, because it always falls on Cinco de Mayo. And we have our huge Cinco de Mayo festival on that day, right in front of City Hall. So when I inquired to some of our city councilmen in Grand Prairie, they said that that was one of the responsibilities of the city secretary, because I also checked here and I was directed to the city secretary. So what is it that I need to do or to get them to act and work with y'all in covering the cost of selecting City Hall as one of the
So in the,
sites, because I know it's costly.
yeah, in the May election, it is a city and school district election. So the county actually doesn't cover any of that cost on our own at all. It's all billable out to the cities and the school districts. And so all of the cities, you know, we give here's the list of locations that we use as the county. And then each city can come back and say, make modifications to that list and say, well, I want this one, I want this location, et cetera. The, generally that cost is split across all of the cities. There are exceptions where, for example, our early voting locations, if you're going to add additional locations more than what we already have assigned in your city, then that city will take on that entire cost for that, not distributed throughout the other cities because they're not asking for it to be added in. So it wouldn't be a shared cost. It would be completely up to the city and the city budget and the city secretary and city council.
Suppose only election day, but early voting is.
No, not in May. It's both, in May, it is all, we conduct it for them, but we have no authority over any of that. They pay for all of it.
Well, I have a question about the Secretary of State, which is on this list.
Yeah.
I'm also, and I vote on the board with the League of Women Voters, and we are currently in the process of working. The league is currently working with the Secretary of and right now with the Secretary of State because of the inconsistencies and how serious that is. Is the elections department and the commissioners is the county also addressing that?
Yes, we are. And for everyone here, I think you're all aware there was an issue on election day. And I wanted to address both of them, the Secretary of State as well as our website. But for the Secretary of State, that was where I received a call, I think it was late morning, from the Secretary of State's office saying that data was incorrect on their end. And they were going to have to post some kind of notice on their site that information for Dallas County was not correct. And they were directing people to our website later in the morning. We looked into that immediately. And every piece of information we had sent off, we confirmed with them leading all the way up to election day, because we've already mentioned how many changes were happening with polling places in the last second. So first off, we're getting all of the precinct data up because of the redistricting. Now we're sending up polling place data and constantly updating it. But all of that information, we have documented emails of that everything was provided. They confirmed everything was good before the election. And then all of a sudden this happened. After the election, we have now had multiple meetings with the Secretary of State's office to discuss this issue. At this point, we're still working with them in order to make sure that our data is completely accurate. But as you know, they've had some issues with their state system over the last handful of months or couple of years. But we are continuing to meet with them. I think we met with them just last week, again, to discuss this issue. So it's definitely an ongoing issue for us. I'm not sure if there's other counties that were in a similar situation, but it certainly is very concerning for us and something that we're going to continue to push them.
More to that point, I believe my understanding is from our association was that later on in the late afternoon, they actually had taken down the entire lookup tool because there were other counties that were having issues with it.
Wow.
And so in the beginning, it was kind of a Dallas County issue because I think we were probably the biggest affected and biggest user of that in that moment, right? With changes to precinct-based and more people trying to look up their information. But I think that ongoing throughout the day, they realized it might have been a larger reach than just Dallas County.
The other thing that I did want to bring up is, the issue that came up with our website initially early on in the morning. I guess I'll say two things about that. The first thing is, I think there was a little bit of misinformation that got out there that our website was down either like the whole day or that information from that site was incorrect. That I think got mixed up with what was happening with the Secretary of State's website. Our website did have the correct information on it. And there was, for the most part, it was up and running. There was a brief moment during the morning around 8 o'clock, I believe, where there were some issues with our website. Nick had reached out to our vendor, and maybe if you could just give them a brief synopsis of what we discovered.
Yeah, can do. So our vendor is Seidel. We've been working with Seidel for forever.
Years.
Yeah. So what ended up happening was a well-meaning nonprofit, the national one, sent out a text from, sent out a link on a text to the people who had signed up to tell me about voting. I forget which one it was. And so that morning, they sent out a text going, hey, reminder, today's election day in Dallas County, blah, blah, election. It ended up triggering some of our website's defense stuff. So what ended up happening is when they clicked it, instead of coming from each individual person's phone, it looked like it was coming from one single IP address or a few shared IP addresses. So when a website gets hit by that same address by a few thousand different things hitting it at one time, it triggers a thing going, this could be malicious. So then it goes into a real quick defense, because Sito's a great company. They go into a real quick defense of going, don't accept anything from these IP addresses. When that happened, we had a few people that would share that address, try to get on, and they're being blocked because we saw a whole bunch come from a few different ones. So they blocked a whole sheet of specific addresses because they saw all of a sudden within a few minutes that text, everyone got the text, hit go. And the way it looked like the similar IP address all coming from one point at one time. So we went down, we got on the phone with them within minutes. We called Aaron and got with Seidel. Seidel then said, well, they can still get there. They got, if it triggered, they have to do a little captcha from your human for a little bit, but then they were able to get that off and we were able to get back to it. But yeah, so about it was 8 o'clock to like 8:40, something like that. We were still up and running. Most people were able to get to it. It's just if you had one of those IP addresses, you were getting blocked because they thought something happened for like 20 something minutes. I forget exactly how much, but we got a whole rundown afterwards. We met with the president of the company in our person, and we kind of walked through why. They gave us a whole one-page write-up, and we talked to our commissioners about it and everything else, and the judge. So, but
I think we did try to communicate with this national organization that was doing this to let them know.
Yeah.
Because it was certainly not on purpose.
No.
Okay, of course,
I
yeah.
think they were probably trying to do this to track the proper information on their end, and it just created a trigger. It pushed a trigger that it thought it was a malicious attack.
And we're obviously on high alert on the election days, right? For any kind of thing like that.
So would that happen again, or?
We reached out. Let me figure out where I left the conversation with that organization. We reached out to them going, hey, I know y'all wanted to go look like it's coming through y'all so y'all can track who clicks and who goes. But when it looks like that, it looks very weird that it's all coming from one address all at one time to one website.
And then how do you guarantee that a different nonprofit, well-meaning nonprofit, that wouldn't happen?
I have a one-page rundown. I'll go through it. They're addressing it in a specific way.
Okay.
Yeah, the site our people are going to
Okay.
try to do that specific way for you. Because we were very specific about, hey, the primary is coming up and we have a May election and which, it hasn't happened again, but I'll go through it again.
Just to fully understand then, are we being proactive in working with possibly other nonprofits for the general or any other future elections that this might happen with?
No, we reached out to that specific one and then we worked with our vendors. So in case it happens again, maybe we will have a different reaction rather than just start blocking them. But no, we're not proactively working with. This was a national election. I got the text as well, and I also clicked through it. I was like, oh, text,
You were
who's
part of
doing
the
this? Let me see how this goes. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
We got hit with thousands and thousands.
Yeah.
It's all your fault, Nick.
Yeah, no.
You're
Just push
right.
it over.
Oh,
Okay.
all right. Oh,
If, well, because the next item here is, the primary runoff. Was there any other items you wanted to talk about specific with the primary? Obviously.
Navigators. Can we talk about the navigators?
Oh, yeah. So we did create the position of navigators to help navigate people to the correct location. I think a lot of those individuals, just like those of you who raised your hand and said you were election workers on election day, were some of our unsung heroes on election day of what they had to go through. Was a lot. It was a lot that they had to go through.
That little green jacket wasn't worth it.
Yeah, I feel like, they were, that was also something that came up in that brief little window We had heard from one of the commissioners, had mentioned this idea. We kind of investigated this idea, realized, whether it be the ad campaign or anything that we could do, we were going to do anything we possibly could to get as much information out. And that was kind of the last line of defense. Obviously, the media campaign was, let's try to give everybody's attention. Let's see if we can get information to them, but understanding that you're always going to have people that, as Nick's already mentioned, like, oh yeah, no, I know where I'm going. I don't even listen to any of this. I don't care. I'm just going to show up at the same place. So they were kind of like the final stopgap to try to get them before they walked in. Some of the challenges there was trying to recruit that many people, that many locations, get them properly trained. In addition to fighting for the individuals that wanted people to be workers at the polls. It's the same group of people. The people that are going to be available to work as a navigator also could be working the polls on election day. And both political parties were working very hard all the way up to the end just to fill all the positions. So it made it very difficult to get enough for all of the places. In the end, we were able to focus really on two groups. We focused, number one, on any location that had been an early voting location. Because I think we assumed that's usually where you see your largest number of people. They're just, okay, that's the early voting location. You could vote anywhere. And so that's where I'm going. So that was one of the places where we focused them on election day. Another place was places that we just expected were going to have incredibly high turnout. A large number of locations that were there. In some of those places, we were able to have multiple navigators available at those places. We need to do a lunch or take a break, those kind of things. And we put together a little training program for them to prepare them. That was mostly focused on just directing them to the right place. We did not want, they weren't there to tell what's our ID requirements. How would I vote in provisional? Like, it's not anything for them. The only thing for them was, how do you use the tablet? How do you direct them to the correct location? I think there was some confusion that occurred. Number one, because I think you had some of the situations we mentioned previously where it was, husband and wife or a neighbor. It's like, well, wait a second, I went there. Well, what do you mean I can't go? And now the person thinks it is the navigator giving the wrong information. Well, no, actually, it's not. They gave you the right information. Other cases, there were a few cases we had informed the judges to use the navigators for that purpose. There were some cases where the tablets that were used inside of the locations were not set up to be directing individuals to other locations because of that complexity that we already talked about. That was the purpose for the navigators. I think there was a few cases there where the information used on the tablets that were inside of the locations that were not for navigation potentially were accidentally used and could have led to a certain level of confusion. Had we had enough time to recruit more navigators and were able to get them at every single one of the locations with enough individuals that could have helped, I think that would have alleviated a lot of that issue. But of course, if we would have had that much time, we would have been able to solve a lot more of these problems earlier on to begin with.
How much time was there for the navigators?
In terms of what the training or
Basically where the concept happened and then, yeah, the training and everything started, because I received a notice. It was the Friday before the Tuesday, the election, of like, this is a panic, we need people. And it was like, well, had I gotten that earlier, I could have been of more help.
yeah, so the navigator program it would have begun approximately in terms of actually planning it, getting information together for the training, would have been about 4 to 5 weeks before the election. So a little over a month before is when it actually started coming together. I think the message that you would have received, what was happening right there at the end, was also what the political parties were seeing with recruiting just election workers generally. There was a large number of people, and for whatever reason, that were at the last minute contacting and saying, I can't work. Or depending on exactly when, because what day did you say it was?
I was aware like Friday.
Because I can't remember when. When was the pickup? When did they start picking up the tablets?
They started picking up those tablets,
I think
Saturday.
Was it about then or before?
they start picking up that Friday. They start picking up those navigators.
So I think
tablets.
because the other part of that is just with regular election workers.
Yeah.
You know, you get scared when we start seeing supplies that aren't getting picked up. And I think that was when they saw, they had a number of people that were trained and a number of people who said they were gonna work. And then they started seeing people not pick up their tablets. And then it turned into, oh, wait a second. We just trained these people, we confirmed they were gonna work and now they're not here and we can't get in touch with them or they say they're not gonna work. That may be where that came
And
from.
then I think they opened up the Saturday training. That was kind of a last second
Yes.
training, yeah.
Yep. Right. And I mean, that's also, you know, what we try to do generally is to create last minute classes that we just prepare for because we know those kind of things are gonna happen. But that's kind of where that came from.
How much do they get paid?
Dee Dee, you know how much they got paid?
$20.
$20 an hour? Was it 20?
20 an hour for the navigators.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Did you determine that the Navigator program was successful? And if so, or if not, what was that like?
I mean, I think when you look at the results of what they were able to do under the situation that they had, I think they were as successful as they could have been. I think if, like I said, if we would have had more time, I think that program, in order to handle the level of questions and voters that they were handling, there needed to be a lot more of them. And there needed to be a lot more preparation for that large number. So I think they did the best that they could with the resources and time that they had. Was every voter served by a navigator? No. But it was because of this time. Yeah.
Do you feel that this is a strategy that needs to be implemented for the November election?
No. And the reason for that is because we're not going to precinct based. If I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't
Okay,
want
that's
to get
fine.
people confused, but if we were going to precinct based, then absolutely. But since we're not doing precinct based for November, then I would say no.
Because I believe that was probably the initial intention, was to direct for a precinct. We did a lot more than that. That was a question, but it was also, what time you close, and there were a lot of questions that were not always precinct based questions. So maybe not as many people, but an information person or something could be beneficial, not so much as a navigator directing traffic to different precincts, but someone just a Q&A person. And I think for some reason, the judges felt good about having somebody out there that could take some of those questions off of them while they were trying to make sure everybody was voting and supporting the clerks and that type of thing. That did take out a little weight off of it.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to just throw this out, if it would never happen again, because before I realized they were going to be navigators, I went to your website and I checked all of the locations for the Republicans and the Democrats that were around where I was sort of 12 or 14 different precincts and where they would go if they were a Democrat or whether they were a Republican. Because I've been judge or alternate judge for 32 years. I've seen it all and I knew this was coming and I wanted to be prepared. I was very glad I did, because one of the navigator tablets I had wasn't working. At least we didn't understand how to work it. Like a Republican one or a Democratic one. It's very confusing. So I'm glad I had my low-tech version of, where to send people, because that was accurate. At least if your website was accurate. I'm not so sure about the navigator. So anyway, I just say in the future, you might want to consider just the old fashioned list of where people go and what people do.
So I will point out that is definitely something that I took note of as a lessons learned. In some cases, just having pieces of paper that are available as well to everybody. So definitely, I thought about that and noted.
Many years ago, that's all we had, this list of precincts.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
what we used to.
Yes, Gwen.
So mine was a comment of praise for navigators. I made my student clerks navigators. They are so sharp. They are so sharp. They catch on to whatever's going on. And then they had to graduate high school. I'm just really.
Well, they started using iPads when they were in kindergarten.
I know.
Yeah.
So this is nothing for them. And all of the nightmares I heard from other places, we didn't have that at the vote center that I served. And they were excited about using them. It's like, well, we haven't been issued one. I said, well, we're gonna get 2 of them. Let's get them. And we got them over there. Thank you, Tacoma, in your office. We got all that equipment and they went to work. We didn't have a lot of complaints. I mean, you all may have gotten them, but I didn't get any at the center. But they were excited to use something different,
Yeah.
from e-poll books to go outside, so it worked out fine.
Yeah, so there was a shortage of navigators.
Yes.
And then was there a plan to like recruit on calls? I know it's really hard to fill the needed. Was there a plan to like have on-call
yeah.
people?
Yeah,
And then
and
that
those
was still a shortage of.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of those then just got filled in to other positions that were kind of, yeah, I mean, there were some judges who contacted us and said, I've heard about the navigator, what if I have somebody that I know that would serve as a navigator? Could they be at my location? Or somebody, and we did take a handful of those where some of the judges themselves found their own navigators. But it was just, first off, people that were being pulled into other, working the polls. I'm not sure, maybe this is anecdotal, but I imagine there might have been some cases where the political parties were calling up somebody and saying, hey, we need you on election day. Well, I'm a navigator, but I really need you to work as a judge at this place or whatever. And then all of a sudden that's pulling, because we're all pulling from the same group of people that are available. But definitely there were initially standbys, but those then just got filled in very quickly into the vacancies that came up at the last second.
And I think too, we were looking at a number of about like 75, 85 of the locations that we were trying to put the people at, right? Based just on, what we saw turnout look like, because we knew we were going to have navigators added to another 500 and something buildings. And so, if there hadn't already been a little bit of a shortage, I think, we weren't really anticipating expanding that as much. And that's why when we made the decision that we needed to expand it by something, because we knew the check-in poll pads, were finicky is what I'll call it. How's that? So, we actually went through and created navigator poll pads for all of the judges. So, I know that I'm sure some of you who were judges maybe had a little delay on your supply pickup, because that was our last minute. Let's make sure all of the judges have their own navigator poll pads and not just navigators. And so we were programming and packing those overnight and trying to get those ready for the next day. And so that way we knew every location at the minimum, if we didn't have a body to put out there, a person to give you, you had those same tools. And so, you could utilize some of your staff for that as well. That was our kind of stopgap for that, to make sure that you had that assistance.
Are there any other questions about redistricting on this one page? If not, we could go on. What you were about to.
Yeah, so I guess I will, the one point I'll make there, and I'll hand it over to Nick to go through some of the rest of his slides here, but the primary runoff is, after that is when the chair of the Republican Party had contacted us and had stated that they would like to return to the countywide voting for the runoff election. We did then get a signed contract, amended contract from both Democrat and Republican parties, which is how we ended up with the runoff election being countywide and not being precinct-based. As I'm sure you saw, there was some legal action that happened after that to try to revert that decision. The courts did not entertain those actions, and we stayed with the countywide voting system that we had already previously in the month. You know, we had the May 2nd joint with our entities, and then this one that just happened here at the end of May, all under the countywide system. And that's kind of where that came about, was because of the amendment of those contracts. It goes back to what we've talked about already of, you know, the level of authority the political parties have in determining what those primary elections are. And then I'll let Nick take over kind of the general statistics, to go over those for the runoff.
So you can see in your handout, the 706 judges, 3,332 clerks. Again, we're at over 4,000 election workers across regional site workers, inspection technicians, phone bank. The students went down to 190. This is summertime. So we had a lot of students that were out traveling, gone, but it's still 190. We're really proud of that. Okay. You can see turnout. One thing that we like to highlight here for turnout was great. Beat all the previous years. One thing we do like to highlight is that early voting number. That early voting number stayed high. Yeah. You know, even without the go vote early because election day could be, you know, they still turned out early voting. And we hope that that's something that keeps trending because we really, really, really love early voting. I think anything else to highlight? Early voting looks good, high turnout. Yeah. That's about it. And do we have any questions about the May? Again, that was countywide. So we got to avoid a lot of those election day stuff. Any questions about the May 26th primary runoff? Absentee was pretty good, 8,000. No amount. And then I think we had, if we're done with that one, we had a couple more items on the agenda. I think the next item was review and discussion of countywide vote center feedback process to include the following.
Yeah, so these are some questions that I received verbally and some in writing from people in the committee that I wanted to bring up. Some of us, maybe all of us, I know I have received complaints about, sometimes complaints about election judges, about things that happen in vote centers. I wanted to understand, and I know that others of us had the same question. What is the current process when someone has a complaint about an election judge or an election worker who on that day or on those days? I don't know how early voting works, but I know on election day, they're county employees. Are they county employees for early voting too?
For early voting, that's the reason
Oh, so
why they have
election
to.
day, they're not?
Correct, on election day, and, you know, depending on which election, as Dee Dee's already kind of mentioned, the
Okay.
rules for the different elections are different. Who has the appointing authority, you know, sometimes, and maybe Tacoma can talk about this a little bit more in detail of who is the appointing authority in different types of elections and who has the ultimate authority in some of those cases to actually implement some kind of,
Who would take a complaint? And sometimes
And be
it's
able to
actually,
do something.
as I know you've seen, sometimes they are illegal things
correct.
that people are complaining about.
So, for early voting, the poll workers are considered, as you would say, a judge. They're not considered a judge, they're considered a presiding election officer.
Okay.
And then you have, as the alternate, you have the alternate election officer. So they're not considered judges for election day because they're not. Because the person who's in charge of early voting will be Mr. Power, because he's the EA, he's the administrator, because he is actually the early voting clerk. And so on that early voting time frame, they actually work for Dallas County Elections, Paul Adams. So if we have a complaint or an issue with a poll worker, that will come into our office, we'll take care of it. We had some times where we had to release a individual from their duties because of something they did illegally or wrongdoing in the polling location during early voting. Now, when it comes to election day, those individuals become judges, election day. Election day judge, alternate judge, appointed judge, and they're appointed by their political party. So, like for the primary election, if it is a complaint out there, we had an individual who had 2 complaints at one polling location. We consulted both political party representatives here on our campus that day, and they were the ones who determined to remove them from their location, not us, but the political party representatives were the ones who determined that. Now, on election day, for November election, any other election, yes, if you're having a problem, like say, like Didi had said about a entity election, citizen schools, yes. I believe in the contract, they'll give us the authority to do that. And we will talk to them about that situation too. But in a November election, again, for early voting, Mr. Paul Adams is the early voting clerk. And so it'll come to us election day. We will consult the political party because again, on that November election, they are appointed by their political party. And so we'll contact the chair of each party or their representatives and talk to them, and they will.
Now that's for primary election day.
Primary and in a November election also. Because again, you have to remember, in November, they are appointed by their political party to work their polls on election day.
Okay.
But and for early voting, we are giving a list of names of recommendations of people who can work for early voting. But again, for early voting, Mr. Paul Adams is the early voting clerk.
Yes. So that's why your name is on every single ballot.
In early voting, yes, ma'am. Yes,
And
ma'am.
we have to sign our.
On election day, you sign your initials, your name on the ballots, because again, you are the judge and you're the appointed judge for that particular day. Yes, ma'am. I don't know who.
Dr. Levels? Oh, I thought so.
I think they were first.
Oh, and I'm sorry, and
So definitely, we would like to talk about the process. Is there something in writing, like the forms that we do on site? We can talk about that, and then we can also talk about some actual ones that Gwenda has in writing.
that's a good point. Do we have anything in writing?
There's a complaint form that should be at all the polls where the person could fill out a complaint form. We also have the complaint form on our website as well. What generally happens on election day or during early voting, we get a call to the voter number, that 469-627 vote. I was just at place blank, judge said blank. I didn't appreciate it. We take that and we put it into Ask Ed, which is our ticketing service. We mark the judge, the location, we take their number down. Then that's taken usually by an intake call. Then they tag a team, and what ends up happening is they send it to someone. Let's say they send it to communications. Then I get a ticket in my inbox and I go, okay, I need to call back this voter, get more information about what happened here. Then I'll get with Tacoma. Tacoma will call the judge, get their side of the story. And then we'll say, okay, this is what we think happened. Please don't do this again, or you are right to do this or right to do that. So we do have a ticketing system that those all go into.
And then we also.
And then we have the paper, the analog paper complaint form.
We'll have the paper complaint form, and if, once we enter that information into our ticketing system, which is called Ask Ed, we then send an email to that individual judge or worker and say, Ms. Lane, you have a complaint filed against you, against such, can you please tell us in your own words what actually happened? And that way we can have, we put that complaint to you in writing, you can respond back to us in writing in your own words. Because what happens is if you call us and we're typing it up, we can misspell something, something else happens, or it's not clear. So we would like for you guys, as judge or even the poll workers, to put all your own, once a complaint has been filed against you, please respond to us in a certain amount of days in your own writing what actually happened.
And those can range from anything from curbside was too hard to get to, or too far away, or I didn't appreciate that they were something in the parking lot. And we call back and go, well, that was outside the 100-foot marker. So technically we're sorry, but it's outside the 100-foot marker that we can't do anything about that. Or I missed this old location. Why did I have to go here today? Stuff like that. So that it's wide ranging. We put it in a ticketing system and we track and see if we saw anything specific and all of that.
And they also have one where we have a procedure team, training team, when there is something procedural wise, whereas the judge is not following the proper procedure. And we'll send that complaint over into the procedure team, and the procedure team would be, talk to the judge, send an email to them saying, this procedure wise. I give you an example, SORs. You know, as you come into the location, what happens? What is the first thing you ask? Hey, are you still at the same address? That's the very first question you ask. And if they don't ask that question and you go ahead and proceed to vote that person, then you come back, oh, the voter says, oh, I don't live at this address. Can I change? And then you might, like you said, you have Tarrant County that's in 3 different counties. You know, you have one person who was probably once registered to vote here, but they're supposed to vote in Tarrant County, and you're supposed to ask that question first. So that's a procedure-wise question where, Ms. Lowe, we would call you back and say, Ms. Lowe, that's what's the correct procedure. This is how you handle this situation in the future, you know, something like that as a complaint comes filed against you or something like that. So.
Gracie, I think Gracie.
Okay, along the same lines, 3 voters, well, let me backtrack. We had the runoff election in Grand Prairie, District 3, which was the one that was as a result of Mike Del Bosque passing away. So we had 2 candidates in the runoff. 3 of the voters that I sent to vote right before 7. So I was not able to contact you guys, you know. It was like 10 minutes till the voting location closed. They were turned away and were told, oh, you don't have any open ballots. And they were confused, so they reached out to me and I said, I don't really understand what not having an open ballot means. And that caused you not to be able to vote. So I'm asking that one question. And
I can help with that one.
okay,
I think what the e-poll book read something about not in this election or can't vote
You
in
don't
this.
have a ballot for
Right,
this election.
and the
Oh.
reason what it says,
Oh.
because they're not actually in
in
District 3.
District 3,
Because they thought
Oh.
they were,
right.
and when they show up to our centers,
Mhm.
it
Oh.
reads that way. And I even went a step further. I had my clerks to turn it over and let them see it. What it actually meant is they used to be in District 3, but
Mhm.
now the lines have been redrawn.
Oh, so
And
they
they
no
couldn't
longer have
vote.
anyone to vote for.
Right,
So that-
there was nobody on the ballot for them to vote at that.
Okay, so they didn't have an open ballot.
Sorry to.
Okay, no, no, and
Okay.
then the second,
Great
and
answer.
then my second question was from an election judge that she knew I was coming to the meeting and she says, ask this, to let our committee know that they need at least 3 more directional signs for each polling location that are strong enough to withstand strong winds. More directional signs.
Dallas is like, dude, Dallas is very.
All day.
And the poll books, you know, the physical poll books, she says that they were very hard to flip. That it appeared that maybe those poll books had been sitting in storage for a long time, that it was difficult for
I
them
guarantee you
to-
they haven't been in a long time because they've been used almost every month. So maybe overuse.
Well, my experience is when
Every
you
time.
flip them, it took a while for the electronics to flip. They flipped
Yes.
fine. It was like, okay, when
No, it
you're
has to
gonna
be.
So
change.
those were the 2
Okay,
things that
okay.
that election judge texted me, that's
Some
all.
good questions.
But the directional signs, they want more, even if they're not the very sturdy, but they need more.
We have Daniel back there is taking some notes because he's actually looking at assisting us in redesigning all of our signs that are out at our polling locations for November, vote centers for November.
No
He's
pressure.
making note of that.
But I think Dr. Levels had a question before
Yeah.
Dan, so.
My question was around the process. Keep hearing from several people about that there's Aztec complaints, there are written complaints, there are online complaints. And so the question is, are we calibrating and aligning all of these complaints together? I guess we can start with that question. Then I'll ask my other 2.
Yes, ma'am. Any complaints that we do receive, we do, like Nick said, we do have a ticketing system. So we put every complaint into the ticketing system, whether it's a handwritten complaint or it's a complaint that's sent to us in the mail, or it's a complaint that was from the post to us or from an email or even from Secretary of State's website that we do receive. So a voter can, because the voter also can go to the Secretary of State's website and file a complaint. In any poll worker or individual, even in here, through the Secretary of State's website, and we receive those. And all those complaints go into our ticketing system, PASCAN.
So when they go into the ticketed system, what are the next steps in process?
So once we get it, once we receive it and it's placed into the ticketing system, then we go ahead and then send it to the judge or the clerk or the individual poll worker to say, such was a complaint filed against you. Can you please respond to this complaint in your back to us? Now, if it's something that where we have, like we said, it will, then once they respond back to us, then we will respond back to them as is, like I said again, as if it was a procedural wise complaint or if it was a complaint against each other, you know, you did this or you said that. I don't like to use the word, but I'm gonna use it anyway. You get a lot of tit for tat, you know, back and forth. So you'd have those type of complaints, and then we'll address those complaints. Anything that's mainly concerning about voting, illegal voting, I mean, anything that's wrongdoing. And also we have some where if there is a wrongdoing done, that goes to our HR person, and our HR person will direct that to our DA.
Because it could be something that needs to be addressed legally.
Yes.
Now, when a judge or an election worker is removed, is that decision at the authority of the party for the primary election? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Not the election
November.
department?
I'm sorry, not the department. No, ma'am.
Okay.
No, ma'am. Again, like I said, this last election back in the March primary,
Mhm.
March 3rd primary, we had a situation where we had at a political location where we had both of them into it, and then we talked to both political parties, and they both agreed to remove both of their judges from that location. So again,
From that location?
just
It's just from that location, or they can no longer serve as judges or election workers?
that will be up to the political party that's appointing them to them.
But this was after the fact.
Yes, ma'am.
So by removing them from that location, that's effective when? Because it's over, the election is over.
Well, actually, we removed them from that early on that day, and we had replacements come in.
Okay, so that occurred that morning.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so in other instances, not specific to that, let's say this was the May election, and we had some situations occur, if someone wanted to remove an election worker, who makes that
Or it may, which one, the joint or the primary run?
joint?
The joint, that would come down to, we had a situation again, where we had a judge, but it was after the fact, and the entity requested that particular poll worker no longer works in that particular entity in that city. Again, they can make that request to have that person done. But also, if something is wrongdoing on that particular day, I believe, however, was written in the contract from the cities and schools, they can say they give Mr. Adams the authority to come in and to remove someone from their post or from their assignment. Because again, like Melissa said earlier, whereas in the city and schools in a joint election, they are the ones, we send them the locations, the standard locations, and they can pick and choose from those standard locations, right? If we send them 10 and they say, oh, I just want this 8, that's what they can do because it's their election. And so also when we send them the locations, we send them the judges to those locations too. We send them the judge's name and the alternate. Now we've had in some situations where a city has requested particular judges and say, I want this judge to work at my location. They can do that. Right. And if they come in and they have a problem, they can say, Paul, Mr. Adams, this judge is not working out. I want to push for them to be removed. That can also happen.
Is it possible, the reason I'm asking these questions is because, we are getting, and it's difficult to explain to people the difference in how the election department responds based upon each election, people don't understand the difference between the primary and the city and the school district. You know, some of us have done a few of these a while, so we understand. And with me working for the district, I knew that the district had that power to do that, but some people don't understand that. And so, and then because what they see is that the election department is making this decision.
That's what they think.
That is the perception out there.
Yes.
And so I think that somehow if we can provide that information to all of the workers in their training, their orientation, because I know I've gone through the training. We never talked about being removed in the training. Maybe the training's been updated since I've been trained, but there was not a conversation or discussion about how you can be removed and who has that authority to do that. And I think if we can do a communication piece around that with those persons, that's one spot. But also with the commissioners, they don't understand either because they believe it's the election department. Everybody believes the election department, so it's a communication for a lot of people, a lot of different areas.
So like I said earlier, like for a November election, early voting, they give us a list of workers, recommendations we can use. But election day, the political parties are giving us a list of names that's appointed. And they are appointed. So once we send out that letter, say you've been. Go
I
ahead.
want to just kind of clarify that language for November.
Okay.
So for November, technically the way it's written in the law is that the political parties provide a list to the commissioner's court. And the commissioner's court appoints those workers in the order in which they were provided by the political party. So, you know, they're going down the list and basically whoever the party says, these are my top 10, those are the top 10 to appoint, and it goes down through that. So it's appointed by commissioner's court, but at the, behest of the parties basically, and it has to be made off of their recommendations. And then in terms of the removal for November, it is a combination. So the county election authority can kind of give the warnings, right? We can say, listen, like, this is not acceptable. This is a problem. And if it comes to like the next layer up, then the county has to consult with the party chair. And a person can't be removed unless the county authority and the party chair both agree to remove a person in November election. And so,
And see, that's different. And I think, and see, so that there is obviously a different process for each election. And so I think if we could somehow communicate that, and I hate, we don't want to talk about anybody being removed. We're not in the business of that. We want people to work and be happy. But when there is a situation and, they're, complaining about the complaint and the removal and whatever is happening to them.
what it needs is a good flow chart.
Thank you. In my head. So yes, thank you. That would be very helpful, based upon each election, what that process looks like.
And that brings me to my follow-up question, that in the complaint form on the website, the complaint form has instructions. Instructions of step 1, you fill out the form, people sign it. This type of election, these forms will go here. In this election, these forms will go here. And please tell your customer, tell your voter that they should expect a response within 10 to 15 days. And if they have not heard 10 to 15 days, then they need to call this number, like a follow-up. That would be my recommendation. And for taking notes and for minutes for secretary, like Ms. Lowe has some wonderful list of concerns and recommendations. This is the agenda.
Yes.
So my wondering question is, we can maybe, if you want to read out loud, because some of them are something that we all need to hear. And my follow-up is, if you want to email this to the chair, vice chair, and the secretary to be added to the minutes, in case something needs to have like an action step or next steps, in case a follow-up needs to be done on the website or on the steps to
We
10.
need to make a recommendation to our commissioners. That'd be great if you were able to do that, Glenda.
Okay.
She did text those to me, and they are very good.
Yes.
I agree.
Yes.
Do you mind, Glenda?
Okay, I didn't expect to, but I will do that. They were just, and what these are, they're like summaries from listening to my election workers and other election judges, because we do talk to each other. We do. And one of the concerns, and I don't want to sound offensive in how I read this, but the way the younger clerks say to me, the average age for election and alternate judges is 75. This is what they said. And so they said, after working 12 to 14-hour days, I don't understand why they're driving on freeways, streets, and frontage roads, making it extremely, I'm not trying to laugh, extremely dangerous to the judges and the community trying to get to Round Table site, the headquarters site. So their recommendation was that the early voting and elections pick-off and drop-off sites should be regional sites closest to the vote centers. Because they're saying that if they have to drive that far, if they've worked all those hours, that's too far for an elderly person to drive. That's one. The next one is, the concern is staff member schedules are being disrupted to open and close facilities that have been designated as vote centers. Their recommendation, judges should have entry and exit access to set up open and close daily, whether vote centers are rec centers, libraries, churches, mosques, worship centers, or schools. And that comes from some of the places we work in Grand Prairie, they openly trust us, so they give us key and access. Then you go down the street where it's an elementary school, schools are out, ma'am. So what time are you gonna be there? It makes it so inconvenient for a lot of the staff members because they're trying to go home for the summer. So I was just saying with all due respect to the schools that are being selected, and that was one of my questions. The vote centers are selected by the cities, right?
Yeah,
Depends on the election.
yeah, it depends on what the election is. If, so May 2nd, those are determined by the entities, they pick them, yes.
Well,
Right.
And I want to double back on that also, because that's true, but also the cities often when they contract and they say we're going to do vote centers, then part of that contract is if they're contracting and saying we're gonna use a countywide vote center model, then they generally have to stick to what our vote centers are, but they can have some substitutes,
Like some
right? But
flexibility
if they want to
check,
do the vote
change it.
center model, then they have to do what the county has already established as our vote center model for the most part.
Okay, thank you.
But I have a question for the number 2, because it's my understanding that still, because I find that people do think that the elections department has the power to tell an entity, make sure you give your workers a key, but they don't have, that's not something
And that's
you
what the
can do.
perception is too.
Correct? I mean, that's,
Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah.
School district's not doing.
However, what we do have though is, we send out contracts to every location. And in our contracts, we do ask for a certain number of time before, like every day of early voting for them to open up. So what time we need to have them open by. We also have in there that the 2 weeks before the election, I think it is,
Yes.
they have to provide us access to the space and to set up the equipment. And so when we have locations that are not abiding by that, we do have some ability to kind of, yeah, so if we know that information, well, we can definitely
contact.
reach out, exactly, because we did put that in the contract to try and make sure that that's a requirement,
Well,
just like air conditioning.
thanks.
And bathrooms.
Oh,
Yeah,
gosh,
and
please
bathrooms.
don't mention air conditioning.
Yeah.
I was fortunate and not so fortunate. I was fortunate to get an election worker that was burning up at a rec center. And I needed another clerk right away, and she was tired of sweating over there, so she called the election office and they got her to our site. I don't want to let her go, but she wants to go back to her other site now. But anyways, the next one, and I have to give kudos to payroll, to voting sites and all this, because one thing, I know, we are being paid timely, and I'm so appreciative. And my workers are.
About payroll.
No,
I haven't heard any complaints about payroll.
I am not either.
What? Not this time.
Oh, complaints from me? Oh, no complaints from none of my workers. No, they get paid timely. I want to make sure that we give kudos to Tacoma staff on this ESC situation we had. We had a situation where the keys didn't work. So we had to get another set of keys the day of the election, right? What happened was some of the voting machines had shifted to the front and jammed the door. So there was nothing we could do to get it open. But because voting sites had sent the equipment of our curbside, I was able to use the keys that work to the vote tabulator. I got the ballots out and was gonna use that. So we don't have any supplies to work with, right? So how are you gonna use voter rosters and they're in that ESC? I told my staff we were gonna be creative. And so, but Melvin came so early that before the polls opened, we were able to take care of it. So he opened it, hit it, did what he needed to do. So that worked out fine. But we were close to making our makeshift voter roster. So my recommendation on voter rosters, you know, when we get our supplies.
Your case.
Yes, that's one of my recommendations. And the other one is the actual box itself. So that could be another piece that we would have to put in that ESC, that we could get it when we're picking up our crates or our great cases, judges' books, whatever we call them, that whole
I think they're trying to make a better solution on that ESC. Because I know we've had situations where when the moving trucks push them in and it moves it.
It does, and so it jams it and we can't open it. That's okay. We're gonna make it work. If we get the vote center, get the voter rosters, and we have a curbside, we can vote people. We're gonna do it. Here's one of the concerns. Why are judges moved to a different vote center from election day rather than remain at the same vote center used during early voting?
I can't answer that because they are sometimes appointed by, again, like Melissa said, political party. But I think one of the things with this new bill, we may be keeping individuals, co-workers at the same locations for early voting. So it's something that we can, I think legislative law is looking into doing. So, because you know, we're gonna start soon early voting on a Thursday, all the way up to that Monday. So that may be something there. But again, I will talk to the people who give us the recommendation for a person who works at a particular polling location.
Okay.
That would be political parties.
What new bill are you referring to?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What new bill were you referring to?
Can't think of the bill, right? The name of the bill is the number.
The new in-person voting period.
Yeah.
Basically, they've eliminated the 3 days between early voting and election day. They pushed early voting to start back a little later and it'll run straight to election day. And it's all considered in-person voting. It's not considered early voting in election.
That's passed?
It passed last year, but it's supposed to go in effect in November, right?
For the November election?
It passed in 2025, but
Yeah.
it's supposed to probably go back into effect in 2027.
Yeah.
Not this year.
Not November,
this year.
next year.
Oh, next,
This year.
okay.
Which brings its own challenges. with
Yeah.
bringing the equipment and flipping the equipment.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's something I know that the Secretary of State is working on. Sorry, I mentioned it, but that's.
So I'm glad you mentioned
It's
it,
coming into,
because I want to look it up. I'm
yeah,
glad you
it's
mentioned
coming in.
Future.
it. Dr. Levin?
Right. The last question I had was how, in the past, many years past, or a few years past, CEAC received those reports about those complaints. Is it possible we can start receiving those complaints again? And the
That's a good
reason I'm
question.
asking is because you can see, we talk to a lot of the workers and the judges, and so I think it's and how they're being processed or responded to. I think that would be helpful for us.
Is that possible, Nick, or Tacoma, do you know? Or you have to think about that.
That would be a Mr.
Yeah, that'd be a,
Paul?
Yeah, we can look into that. We need to make sure that there's no personal information that's in there.
Nothing legal
We can-
that's-
Right. I would also just mention kind of the piece that Tacoma's already mentioned, that, you know, I've seen many cases, and I'm sure you're all aware of, you know, I'm at a location and I call up the judge's hotline. Well, you know, Elaine is horrible. She's horrible because all these reasons she was nasty to me. She's just an evil person and she should never work again. And that's the complaint that you see. But then, you know, like Tacoma says, she's gonna call Elaine and say, okay, well, what actually was the situation? You know, you may be at a point where when you're getting the report, maybe you're not seeing that next piece from Tacoma because maybe we haven't heard back from Elaine or those kind of things might be happening. So just, you know, be aware that there is a lot of back and forth sometimes, unfortunately, with workers.
So there was, I remember there was one complaint that was pretty public. There was a situation where somebody went to vote. And I believe the election worker said like, I have to work tomorrow. I'm getting out of here. And this was because of the extended hours. So in a situation like that, I'm just curious if that was something that was addressed or if that gets addressed
Yeah, so
privately. And
that's
then-
that's a perfect example. In that particular case, the political parties have asked for some information. The Democratic Party actually asked for, after the primary election, asked for all the information from the poll books to show when the last votes were cast at different locations. And took those reports that you're talking about. And there were a handful of judges that the Democratic Party chose not to use again for the runoff because they discovered things
Well,
specifically
I
to the
did
point
wonder
that
about
you were
that.
talking about.
Yeah.
You know,
They left.
those items.
Discovered what?
They left because they extended the voting hours.
They
when there was all the
refused?
Yeah, they said-
confusion. Well, yes.
They were like,
basically, They said, I'm
there
out
were
of
some
here.
individuals that were, you know, it doesn't matter to me that the judge extended the hour. I'm not, we're done. We
So people
worked too
couldn't
long.
vote. Yeah.
It's been too long of a day. We're gonna
Oh my
close up.
God.
And as you mentioned, some of that stuff made the news.
Well, and I also understand it. I can understand both sides in the sense, somebody thinking I'm only signing up for, let's say it's 9 to 5. We all know it's not. And then all of a sudden the rules change and they're asking me to stay these hours I didn't think I was going to be here for. So I understand where they must have been coming from. However, in a situation like that, yeah, well, yeah, no, same. And I would never leave, but not everybody's built.
You sign up to vote and to
Yeah.
work until election's over.
Well, and no, that makes sense. So basically you're saying in that case, the parties decided to not work. Okay.
Correct, yes.
And the reason I pose my question and I'm requesting that is because if we are the body that we are supposed to review the effectiveness of each election.
Yes.
We're supposed to meet after each election. We're supposed to review the data provided to us and for us to make an informed decision. And we have to report this back and,
To our commissioner.
to our commissioners. And that is the expectation. And I think that when we're asked about complaints and things that are happening out there and we're unable to respond, like, so what's going on? And what I don't want to do is, I think we are in a very positive climate right now with the elections department in our community, even though there's been, the whole navigators and the whole, everybody wants to blame the elections department. So I think there's been a lot of, communication, over communicating and marketing, trying to get people to understand it wasn't the election department. It was the parties that made this decision and whatever. But I think as we are continuing to stay in this space, let's stay in this space and let's continue to work collaboratively. And that helps us if we can have as much information as possible when we are making those recommendations.
You have 2 more?
Yes. I have 2 more, then I'll
Okay.
be quiet for the night. So this concern was about the software package we've used in the past. Regarding the election workers being able to see their time frames, even though I have to say thank you again for the manual sheets that they get to do, the time sheets. Whoever does.
That was Dee Dee. Dee Dee was.
Dee Dee, thank you. So this was before we knew about that, but the concern was they want to go back to a place where they can actually look at, even though they're not supposed to have their cell phones, they still want to be able to take a picture of the cumulative work schedule right there from the system, so it'll match up exactly like what they're gonna write down on that manual sheet. So that was one of their concerns. They really want to be able to do that. The other one, lastly, is concerning closing night. That sign out process is posing a problem. I'll give you for instance. We close everything down except for the one that's gonna clock everybody out. But once you clock out on that system, you're still working. Because what the team is still doing, taking that one e-poll book, taking all of this, but we packed everything else out. We put it in the vehicles, we've done it all. But those employees are still working, those team members. How can we factor in, I don't know if it's gonna be 30 minutes or 40 minutes or something, some kind of procedure to allow for those workers to be compensated for the delay in completing that last bit of work.
I get an email from payroll asking me to change it if I need to,
correct.
before they submit it. Do you guys not get that?
I do, but I haven't
So
ever added that time.
Oh, you have?
so part of our process, what we started doing, I think, was it last year?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so basically we asked you guys to make sure that the clock in and out are accurate, right? And, you know, there was a time where we were getting a lot of calls to do that adjustment. I was here 15 minutes, I was here, whatever. And that's a lot of manual adjustment on our part. So what we implemented was two things. One, we do all of our time by the 15-minute mark now. So everything is, if you clock in at 6:07, or 6:06, it's rolling back to 6 o'clock. Everything is rolled backwards in the morning to 15 minutes and then up
Yes.
to the 15-minute mark. And then we add an additional 15 minutes on either end. So in the morning, everyone, and it's, I'm gonna say 99%, right? So if your team comes in and everyone's clocking at about 6, give you like 5:45. Now, if somebody clocked in at 10 o'clock in the morning, it doesn't take that person for account. It looks for like that grouping of people. And then at the end of the day, if you know, if somebody clocked out at 2:30 in the afternoon, but everyone else clocked out at 7:45 at night, then those people clocked out at 7:45, get an additional 15 minutes on the end of that. So in the front end and the back end, early voting, there's nothing on the front end because your setup is done on a different day. So it's on that day, on your setup day. But on
Election.
on the last day of early voting, that is added to the back end. So election day is on both.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's really good information that we never told.
We've never had it
Thank
before.
you for sharing that. Also, whoever's responsible for allowing us to adjust it, that's really.
That's back to you, Nick.
Is that another DD thing? Thank you. But I do have a question.
Put more time.
Okay. I always figured when the last, when I signed out, I was done. We still have to, the judges anyway, have to take the stuff back to the center. And sometimes that's an hour and a half. We have to wait in long line. And I just used to, we got an extra $25 for doing that. We don't anymore. And so when I turned it in this last time, I guess it was for the May 2nd, they said, oh, well, we can add an extra hour for you standing in, waiting in this long line. I said, well, I never knew that we could actually add that hour for the time. So what is the truth on that?
So you get paid, it's $12.50, the law states $25 is max. You get on your stub, it will say $12.50. You'll see you'll see $12.50. That's your $25 for pickup and delivery. So everybody that is a judge, let's say you're a judge and you decide, I don't like to drive in the dark. I'm closer to home, and you have a clerk. When they sign off on that balance seal, we look at that balance seal to see who actually dropped it off. I know you picked it up. So sometimes that $12.50 gets split between, that's up to the judge, but you still get that $25. And that is to compensate for that time that you're going from your polling location to your regional site. That's that $25 that you're getting paid.
So you all add that then?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so used to when we filled it all out, we
Yeah, you
wrote.
used to circle it,
Yeah,
yes.
but now we don't. So I
No,
just assumed we weren't getting it.
No, we take the actual balance seal, look at who signed it, and then we go in and that's when we add your $25. Your $12.50, if you were the one that picked it up and then your alternate dropped it off, then they'll get the $12.50. But just because you're a judge and you dropped it off, or you did drop it off or pick it up, you don't automatically get the $12.50. So we do look at that balance seal. And then those sheets that you get, we're going to implement doing one for Election J, just so that they have them. But it is definitely a reference sheet. And what I would suggest, the reason why we did it is because of that same reason. Why I actually got there at 6:10. My sheet is showing, my hours don't match. And so what we do is audit against what y'all have put in the poll book. We use that as an audit form to see where we're off, if it matches or something's off. So that's the whole purpose of those. So we want to do that same thing for election day because that's the biggest call I get. I started at this time. Why is my time this? Well, we explained to them, the judge is the person that actually we send the email to the judge. And if you could tell your judges, we had 40 Democrat and maybe 35 Republican, maybe more Republicans did not respond to the email to check their staff. So the email the payroll that went out
Yes.
this morning that people are so excited.
We sent mine back.
A lot of them didn't respond. So then here I have to do is a supplement because they're off. They'll say, oh, we owe 30 minutes or 2 hours. If you can talk to your cohorts and explain to them how important it is for them to get that information back to us, we give them ample time to do it. And we just hope that they can start doing that. So then we have a clean one like we did for early voting. I didn't get one call. So if they can get them back in time, we can have, everybody's happy, they get paid, they go party. The judges just aren't all responding in effective time, and that's something that we need them to do.
Well, thank you for your efforts to do that. We
We're
really
trying,
appreciate
right, you know, it's getting better and better, so we're gonna keep working
Keep
on it.
plugging. Thank you.
Did you say you had one more, Gwenda?
No, that was it.
Okay. And did you have your hand up?
I think we're not done.
Yes, sure.
So I have a question that came up at a community meeting. And it's about the elections coming up, at the general election in November. Asking about training for our staff and community in general about the role of poll watchers and about election integrity, individuals who might be at the polls as well. Can you talk a bit about the training that's going to be given to our staff and judges about those people's roles and what we can anticipate that if there's any issues that how they could respond?
So I would say, I guess a couple of things there. I have a feeling that the amount of poll watchers for those that are veteran workers, they are probably very used to that and are very much expecting that. I can tell you that we are already working on revamping some of the poll worker training for the November election. Part of that is going to involve things like security, things like handling difficult situations, de-escalating confrontations with individuals, and including going over that concept of, what the poll watchers are there for and what they can and cannot do. I think part of the important thing is just to remember, if you're not sure, okay, well, what exactly does a poll watcher do? You're talking, to me, the first thing is, okay, well, if you know what the name of the title is, of the position, that should give you a very good indication of what they can and what they're supposed to do, supposed to watch. Are there fine detail items that we're going to go over in poll worker training? Absolutely. But generally, if somebody said, well, what are they going to do? Are they going to be able to intervene? Are they going to be able to stop somebody from the actual title of the position gives you the vast majority of information you need on what it is when you're talking to people in the public. What does a poll watcher do? They watch. That is their responsibility. That's why they're part of the system. But in poll worker training, there's going to be more additional information of certain things they can and cannot do. So that's definitely going to be covered in anticipation for a very, very high turnout November election.
So conversely, will there be any outreach to people who want to be poll watchers and or integrity police, if you will?
Well, not from us. We don't appoint the poll watchers. We're not going to. The political parties do that.
Right.
The political parties will.
Candidates and political parties.
Yeah,
Yes.
they do their own.
And I want to give kudos to your staff too, Paul, on being responsive. I have not had any problems with calling the team and asking any question. I didn't get a response. So I do appreciate that. The other part I wanted the team to know is this. Why is it that wherever we work during early voting, I always get at least 2 from Secretary of State's office coming to visit and I get at least 3 poll watchers. They love to come visit us. I don't know why. But they always say, oh, I just left Paul's office. I said, is Paul sitting? Alexis is one of them. She always finds us. I don't understand why, but we always have good conversations. But
She just like you.
I guess she does, but I don't know how she knows where I'm working. But anyways, I wanted on a serious note to let your staff know that they have been most helpful to us and they've been extremely responsive. I tell Elaine that all the time. I'm really happy with the progress that's been made. Thank you a lot.
Oh,
Could I just real quickly follow up on what Renata said and even ratchet it up a little bit? I'm an attorney, so I'm a little more concerned about the legal aspects of this. But as we all know, the Secretary of State is resigning. And there's a lot of speculation and worry about who the new person will be and what their motives are going to be and what their plans are to deal with this general election. So I'm assuming that the poll watcher training is mandatory. Is that correct?
For those individuals, yes.
And who will create the script or whatever for that training? Is that something that you all do, or will the Secretary of State provide that?
That is through the Secretary of State.
Yeah, for the poll watchers, you're talking about themselves, not for the poll workers, correct?
Poll watcher.
Poll watchers, sorry,
Poll
poll watchers.
yeah,
is what I
that's the
meant.
Secretary of State. They're
I am
required.
concerned about that.
Yeah.
You know, in previous elections, some
Whoever
of
the new person will be.
the more radical forces have trained the poll watchers to be disruptive. And that's when, after that, is when we got the poll watcher training. So I think there's just a lot of concern about what they're going to pull this year and how are we going to respond to it. My second question is, I always heard this from Judge Ken Mulber, used to tell us all the time that election judges on election day have the power of a district judge in their location. So is that still the case? And if that is the case, what power does the election judge have over the poll watcher as far as dealing with behavioral issues?
The first part of your question, that is my understanding, yes. The other part of it is, I know there has been a number of items that have been put into the law to protect the watchers from actions by election officials, from stopping them from doing their duties. Melissa may have some.
I do think that, before you say something, Melissa, I do know as an election judge, I would definitely like there to be training specifically to legally, what can a poll watcher do? And what can I do to stop them if they're going outside? Because I agree with you. What they're trained, if it's because the Secretary of State does training, the parties also do training.
Yes.
And candidates
Yes.
training,
Yes,
that's the
they
part
do
that I don't.
Correct. So anyway, but anyway.
Candidates hire the poll watchers too.
No. So that's like catch-22, right? Because the poll watchers are obviously they're allowed to observe, right? They're allowed to be in a space where they can see. They're not supposed to be talking to the voters because there's a lot of things that go along with it. The judge always has the authority to remove a poll watcher from their location if
He's
the
interfering,
poll watcher is
interfering.
interfering
Question
and
elections. Yeah.
really breaking the law. Where we get hesitant is because that is a legal ramification, I believe, of a misdemeanor or felony to you, the judge. So me telling you, yeah, go ahead and get that person out, and then you getting arrested for it is a little, I'm not there, I'm not in the moment making that decision as to whether or not it's something that, if the conclusion comes that you were in the wrong and you inappropriately kicked out that poll watcher, they could essentially charge you with that as the judge. And so that's where we, not being in that space in that moment, it's hard for me to really tell you as the judge when you're the one with the authority and also the consequence essentially, legally, what to do. And so that's when you when you ask the question about like, what are we going to tell you to kick someone out? I don't know that I would, because ultimately that's gonna lie with your guys' authority as a judge, and it's gonna lie with your responsibility. Now, we do, dispatch assistants, right? We've sent out sheriffs to places if there's things that are getting, out. And so there is some legal assistance there to try and mitigate the situation. But ultimately, as a judge, that's something you're gonna take on and, legally, you're gonna be responsible for. And so, kind of, I don't want to give advice that I'm not gonna be the one facing the clock.
All I'm saying is we
for.
kind of need to
Yeah,
know
yeah.
Yeah.
before this election, what is the authority of it?
That's why I go
Who
back.
do we call
Go ahead.
if we have
Excuse
an
me.
issue we can't handle?
That's why I want to go back to what
Well,
Elaine says.
You should always feel comfortable to contact
Correct.
us and because
Right.
under any problem that you have. And like Melissa says, if needed, we will send out, sheriffs, deputies to assist. But when it comes down to that specific piece of, if I have this authority, I can, like Melissa said, we can't,
We can't say.
because then there's the legal protection of the watcher that could then come after. That would have to be a decision the judge has to.
I'm just wondering if we need, I'm personally thinking of possibly reaching out to the Texas Civil Rights Project, which is a nonpartisan elections watch group, to see if they have direction for election judges, nonpartisan, how to interact with poll watchers based on. Because I think that is an excellent question. And I don't want, and everybody's different. I know for me, I don't really care. If somebody thinks I'm gonna arrested or whatever. What they can do. But I know some people are, if a poll watcher says, I'm legally can do this, they will back down. So I do think we need direction, legal direction.
That's what I'm going back to. We have to find a way to put some
Maybe
legal
that's
training
something
into
that
our
the
training.
Texas Civil Rights Project-
I'm going to their conference next week in Houston. I can ask.
That would be
Where?
really
Where?
good.
It's in Houston.
The Progress Texas,
No, it's Texas.
Texas Civil Rights Project. That'd be great.
That would be really good. I want to tell you, thank you too, to your staff on that training. The last training we got where it was interactive and we actually did actual cases, that was some of the best training. I really appreciate it. You listen to us and I appreciate
That
it.
is something we're trying to,
That was
and
great.
that's on
That was
some of
great.
the other topics for discussion. Training is something that we're really gonna be looking into over the summer. I will send out to Elaine and members of the committee some draft manuals when we get a little bit closer for you to give us some feedback on, but definitely the hands-on piece was something that.
It's hard. I mean, it was.
It was
hard.
hard.
It was a challenge for some of us who've done it all our life.
It put us on,
We all learned.
we did, we really did learn from it. I thought I knew a little bit, but my goodness.
So it is getting late, but I don't want us to skip anything.
Gracie has a point.
Oh,
Well,
sorry,
she was
Gracie.
thanking them, the staff, and likewise, I'd like to thank the staff, Jayla and all. And to inform you that the reason you just saw my nameplate all last year I was on a medical leave fighting breast cancer, but I'm cancer-free now, so I will be. And I've had the honor of also being an election judge in 2008, the Obama-Hillary election, and it was wild. After that, you know how we have the convention after the election? I had 3,000 delegates in there fighting it out, right? The Hillary and the
Have you been
Obama
told about that?
delegates. That's 2008. And then I
Oh my.
followed up
Books
being an
have-
election judge several years thereafter. But then I just got involved in just mentoring the youth. I was a high school librarian at Townview Magnet High School, and in LULAC, I just love the kids, being part of the League of United Latin American Citizens youth group. And I got involved in that and made sure that as soon as they turn 18, that they register to vote. And so it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to serving on this advisory board with you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
The next meeting, can we possibly tentative date?
Sure, but I think we have a couple more topics of discussion.
Yes.
We do.
We do. We were going, training, I think, but unless we feel like there are no questions about it, These were some things that people brought up, regarding training. As Gwenda mentioned, there were some training suggestions that were made, and some of them have already been implemented. Paul listens to feedback from the judges and the clerks, and I don't know if anyone else has any training about that. Oh, are there any plans for any equipment updates? Do you know, like definitively or?
Yes.
Okay.
The question is timing of when that will necessarily happen, not before November.
Okay.
We were looking at that possibility, but there's issues with certification and having to go out for a full bid. So we are going down the path of implementing it or going forward with an RFP and looking at new equipment at some point in the relative near future. However, in anticipation for the fact that we do have, number one, aging equipment, and secondly, a larger number of early voting locations over the years have been added since we first got this equipment back in 2019. We are looking to rent a substantial amount of equipment for the November election so that we have both a reserve, but also have additional equipment out in the field leading up to the November election. So that's what we're looking at in the immediate term, additional equipment. After that, then going out to a formal bid.
Yes.
Well, I will give you this feedback. I'm sure you've heard it before. The voting machines that we set up with the legs that pull out and so forth, they're very, very heavy. And they're, even for me, kind of getting harder to maneuver through. I don't know whether I'm getting weaker or they're getting heavier, but they seem to be bulky. The bigger problem right though is the legs sometimes are open, they don't pull out right. It's either they're kind of either getting old or wearing out or something. So
And when we get new equipment, we will get new cases and everything for that, as well as we will be looking at getting new curbside units. I know it's also been a complaint of almost every judge in the entire county.
That's something not listed. Is that okay? Yes. I was just thinking, well, a very quick question. Why did we not review the May general election? Right? We reviewed the primary and the primary runoff, but not the general?
I don't know. We
Okay.
have, the agenda, we mentioned the May primary election, but I don't know if we mentioned the May.
I was just wondering if there was like a reason.
We cover it in the next quarter though.
I think we just missed it.
Okay. And then I was thinking, a lot of the things that were mentioned tonight for improvement, I love that we had a solutions-oriented conversation around it. And it made me think, how can we continue to like balance our time between reflecting on past elections, but then making sure that we allot sufficient time for like proactive, including something as simple as like, here's the messaging. And I know this, like the staff, I trust the staff, but just to like give us a little bit of space for like input, oh, this works, or like, I prefer this language, or, whatever. So like thinking proactively. And then the last piece I thought for the next meeting, all this is like just thinking forward, I guess, is for the next meeting, if there are any polls or even a job description for CEAC so that so selfishly, I can better prepare, like if, I should be telling my neighbors something or, collecting information somehow, because I don't have I'm not a poll worker. I have other experiences, but if there's like a way that we can be helpful, that even from staff, like, I don't know who comes up with the job description. I guess that's the question too, but
So
yeah.
The committee is created by Commissioner's Court, and maybe Ellen, we could send out that was adopted by, because Commissioner's Court created the committee, and that's the controlling document that we could send out.
Okay. And then we have the control, a couple of things though to answer your question. One, even though we meet quarterly is the minimum amount of time that we are required to meet. It does not mean that is the only time that we have to meet. So if we want to meet more often, we absolutely can.
Or like at the next meeting to spend some time.
Yes, so that if we want to meet, if we want to make sure we meet after an election, and then that election is focused a lot on results in the previous election, but then we want to meet a couple of months later, or even a month later. I know there are CEACs in other counties. And I met with a woman who used to be the chair of our CEAC. They met once a month at one
Yes.
point for a little while
Mhm.
because they were focusing on some specific issues.
Yes,
If we want to do that, we can do
we
that.
can.
Can I interject?
Uh-huh.
I think at one point you all had subcommittees.
Yes, we did. And that's
So it sounds
that's
like
another thing.
that
we
was
could
a
do.
way to
That's-
get away from creating, having to go through the agenda process.
The opens meeting, the opens meeting.
Like
act
when
was
you're
another
saying,
line.
when you're Camilla, you're speaking about messaging, maybe there could be a communications subcommittee or something to help the communications team prepare messaging. You guys could break into those subcommittees. Because of course, you know, just in terms of everyone's time and how that works and breaking into these smaller groups. So you can come up with solutions and then come together. But I would recommend that's something you do.
That's a great idea. Thank you for reminding me of that, Jayla. Because that way you can meet and then bring the meeting to the bigger committee, and you don't have to follow the opens meeting act when you're in the subcommittee. Yeah, you don't have to post it, you don't have to do all that.
And that's why I was hoping that before we close, set up the time. I would recommend that we can meet in 6 weeks, so we can create those little subcommittees. Because we'll be able to brainstorm, say, okay, which is critical? A subcommittee on fake media, what's happening, everything that is, you know, somebody wants to focus on this, so we can have a subgroups. But I was hoping to, maybe we can meet.
I would love to meet again in 6 weeks. I think it'll be difficult to set a specific day and time right now. I know some people don't manage their own calendar. And some people definitely need to look at the calendar.
Yeah.
But maybe Anna, if you could send something out to everyone, asking
Some
for time,
recommendations.
suggesting time.
So then on the next agenda would be something like discuss and take action on the creation of subcommittees, right? Something on that. agenda.
And create subcommittees.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So before we close, I do need to one more time ask if there's anyone in the general public who is not in the CEAC who wants to speak. Anyone online or anyone in the room?
Nothing online.
Well, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn, second to.
So it's been moved and seconded. Okay, and all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Right, so we are adjourned at 8:19 p.m.
Great work.
Thank you. First line, first.
Smaller, I think.